What happened to Snoop Dogg that night will shock you. A simple evening turned into something unforgettable. Watch until the end to uncover the full story, and don't forget to subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. The warm Los Angeles evening buzzed with life as Snoop Dogg leaned back in the leather seat of his Cadillac Escalade. The rhythmic hum of the city provided the perfect backdrop for what should have been a celebratory night. A new album, glowing reviews, and a tight-knit group of friends ready to toast to success. Everything was set for a perfect evening. He glanced at his phone, where a text from his manager and longtime friend Jason lit up the screen. Jason, "We're outside the restaurant, man. Can't wait for this spot you picked." Snoop chuckled to himself and replied, "Hold tight, I'm pulling up now." His longtime crew deserved this evening. They'd been with him through thick and thin. Studio sessions that stretched into dawn, endless tours, and the grind of the industry. Tonight was about relaxation, gratitude, and a chance to reconnect. As he pulled into the valet stand of Eminence Dine-In, the exterior radiated exclusivity. Minimalist decor, polished glass, and a quiet sophistication that screamed, "For the elite." Snoop stepped out, adjusting his fitted suit, and spotted his friends, Jason, Tina, and a couple of younger protégés from his label, waiting near the entrance. "Snoop Dogg in the building," Jason exclaimed, pulling him into a hearty handshake turned hug. The crew laughed, exchanging inside jokes and playful ribbing as they approached the restaurant's grand double doors. Inside, the ambiance was nothing short of opulent. Chandeliers cast warm light over polished mahogany tables, and the subtle hum of soft jazz filled the space. Waitstaff moved with a practiced grace, dressed in sharp uniforms. Snoop was no stranger to luxury, but even he felt the weight of the restaurant's curated sophistication. Approaching the hostess stand, Snoop flashed his signature grin. "Reservation for Dog, party of 6. The hostess, a young woman with a sleek ponytail and an air of practiced detachment, glanced at her computer. Her expression faltered slightly before she straightened and said, "One moment, sir." Tina leaned toward Snoop, whispering, "She looked at us like we just crashed the place." Snoop shrugged. "Probably just verifying. You know how these spots are." Minutes passed. The hostess returned, her demeanor colder than before. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dogg, but it seems there's been an error with your reservation. We don't have a table available tonight." The mood shifted instantly. Jason frowned, crossing his arms. "Hold up. That can't be right. We called ahead, confirmed it this morning." The hostess avoided eye contact. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked this evening. I apologize for the inconvenience." Tina stepped forward, her frustration palpable. "Fully booked? We just walked by and saw open tables. What's really going on here?" The hostess's lips pressed into a tight smile. "Those tables are reserved for other guests." The air around them grew tense. Snoop kept his composure but felt a familiar anger bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "Look, I get it. Mistakes happen, but we've had this booked for weeks. Can you check again?" Before she could respond, a man in a tailored suit emerged from the back. His confident stride and smug expression revealed his position of authority. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Snoop turned to him. "Yeah, apparently our reservation doesn't exist anymore. Mind explaining how that happened?" The man's smile was cold, calculated. "Mr. Dogg, I apologize for any confusion, but we must adhere to our reservation policy. Tonight, we are at capacity." Jason bristled, his voice rising. "You're seriously turning away Snoop Dogg? You know who this man is?" The manager's condescension was razor sharp. "We treat all our guests equally here, sir." Snoop felt the stares of other diners. Whispers rippled through the restaurant as people began to recognize him. The humiliation burned hotter. This wasn't about a mistake. It was about something deeper, uglier. "Let's go," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Snoop," Tina started, but he cut her off. "I said, let's go." The group followed him out, their celebratory mood shattered. Outside, the city lights seemed colder, harsher. Snoop took a deep breath, trying to steady the anger that churned in his chest. He had faced plenty of challenges in his life, but this felt personal. It wasn't just about a reservation. It was about what he represented. As they piled into the car, the silence was heavy. No one knew what to say. Tina was the first to break it. "This isn't right. We can't just let them get away with this." Snoop nodded, his jaw tight. "Oh, we won't. Trust me, we won't." The car rumbled to life, carrying them away from the polished facade of Eminence Dining. As they drove through the city, the hum of traffic outside barely registered. Snoop stared out the window, his mind racing. This wasn't the first time he'd faced this kind of subtle, insidious racism. It wasn't just about being a celebrity. It was about being black in a world that still placed limits on where you could belong. By the time they reached Tina's place, the tension in the car had only grown. "You know what you have to do," she said before stepping out. Her words hung in the air long after she closed the door. When Snoop finally arrived home, the silence was deafening. His phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from his friends, social media notifications, and a flurry of messages from fans who had already caught wind of what happened. He sat in his living room staring at his phone. The anger had settled into something sharper. Resolve. He knew he couldn't let this slide. Not for himself. Not for his friends. Not for his community. Finally, he opened the camera app and hit record. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion, "something happened that I can't ignore." As he spoke, the weight of the night poured out. This wasn't just about one incident. It was about a lifetime of being told where he did and didn't belong. It was about everyone who had ever been humiliated, excluded, or made to feel lesser because of their skin color. When he finished, he uploaded the video with a single caption, "It's time for change." The video was live, and Snoop knew there was no turning back. The following morning, Snoop Dogg woke up to the relentless buzzing of his phone. His notifications were exploding. Fans, friends, and even strangers had flooded his social media with comments, messages, and reactions to the video he had posted the night before. He sat up in bed, scrolling through the responses, each one bringing the events of the previous evening back with sharper clarity. "This is exactly why we can't stay silent," read one comment. "They think they can treat us however they want because we're black," said another. Some messages were from people sharing their own experiences. Stories of being turned away, ignored, or humiliated in restaurants, stores, and public spaces simply because of the color of their skin. The words were raw and painful, each one a reminder that what had happened to him was far from unique. Snoop felt a familiar ache in his chest. He had lived through this kind of injustice his entire life, but now it wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. By midday, the video had gone viral. Clips of his speech had been reposted on every platform imaginable. Headlines screamed for attention, placing Snoop Dogg at the center of a growing wave of outrage. Eminence Dining's name was now attached to accusations of racism, and the restaurant's Instagram page was inundated with angry comments and one-star reviews. It wasn't just a backlash, it was a reckoning. Jason called, his voice alive with a mix of anger and excitement. "Bro, have you seen this? Your video is everywhere. People are pissed. I'm talking full-blown boycott levels of pissed." Snoop rubbed the back of his neck, still trying to process the magnitude of the response. "I've seen it. People are sharing their stories, man. It's bigger than just me." "That's what I'm saying," Jason replied. "This isn't just about last night. It's about all the nights people like us got turned away, disrespected, made to feel like we don't belong. This is the moment. We gotta do something." Snoop leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. The city was alive as always, but today it felt different. There was a fire burning beneath the surface, a collective anger ready to ignite. "You're right," he said, "but it can't just be about calling them out. We need to show them what we're about, build something that can't be ignored." Jason's voice crackled with energy. "Say the word, and I'm in, whatever it takes." After the call ended, Snoop sat in silence, his mind racing. He thought about the countless moments in his life when he had faced the same quiet discrimination. The side glances, the extra scrutiny, the unspoken rules that told him he didn't belong. It was exhausting. But this time he wasn't alone. This time, people were listening. Tina arrived at his house later that afternoon, her face set with determination. "You've seen the comments, right? People are fed up. We can't let this momentum die." Snoop nodded, motioning for her to sit. "I know. Jason's been blowing up my phone, talking about boycotts and rallies." Tina leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Forget boycotts, forget protests. We've done all that before, and it only gets us so far. What if we create something? Something that shows we don't need their tables because we've got our own." Snoop tilted his head, intrigued. "What are you thinking?" "A dinner," Tina said, her voice gaining momentum. "But not just any dinner. A night that celebrates us, our culture, our food, our music. We bring together the best chefs, the best artists, and we make it something they can't ignore. Call it a table for all." The phrase hung in the air for a moment, and then Snoop smiled. It was perfect. "A table for all," he repeated. "Yeah, I like that." They spent the next hour sketching out the basics of the idea. The dinner would be more than a response to Eminence Dining. It would be a statement, a celebration of everything the restaurant had tried to deny them. As Tina rattled off ideas for chefs and venues, Snoop's mind raced ahead. This wasn't just about one event, it was about creating something lasting, something that could inspire others to do the same. By evening, word of the planned dinner had already begun to spread. Tina's post on social media had been shared thousands of times, with people tagging their favorite chefs, musicians, and artists. The excitement was palpable. People were hungry, not just for food, but for a space where they could be seen and celebrated. Jason called again, his voice barely able to contain his excitement. "Man, I just saw Tina's post. People are hyped. We've got chefs volunteering, musicians offering to perform, even artists wanting to donate pieces. This thing is blowing up already." Snoop grinned, his chest swelling with pride. "Good. Let's show them what we're about." But even as the excitement built, there was pushback. Late that night, Eminence Dining released a statement. It was filled with the usual corporate buzzwords: misunderstanding, commitment to diversity, and an apology for any inconvenience caused. But the tone was hollow, and it only fueled the fire. People saw through the carefully crafted words, and the backlash intensified. Tina texted him the statement with a single comment. "They're scared. Good." Snoop stared at the message for a long time, the words resonating in his mind. They were scared, and they should be. This wasn't just about one night of exclusion. It was about decades of systemic racism, about a society that had long decided who deserved a seat at the table and who didn't. He put his phone down and stared out the window at the city lights. A part of him wanted to let the anger consume him, to lash out and watch them burn. But another part, the wiser part, knew that wasn't the answer. This wasn't just about tearing something down. It was about building something better. Snoop knew the path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, resistance, and criticism. But he also knew they had the power to make something meaningful, something that would last. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The next morning, Snoop Dogg sat at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, and stared at the notebook in front of him. His mind was alive with ideas, each one more ambitious than the last. The phrase Tina had coined the day before, "table for all," felt like more than just a clever name. It was a declaration, a rejection of the gatekeeping that had defined places like eminence dining. This was about creating a space where everyone, no matter their background, could feel valued and celebrated. As he jotted down notes, his phone buzzed incessantly. Texts, emails, social media notifications. His world was ablaze with people offering support, sharing their stories, and asking how they could get involved. The momentum was undeniable, and Snoop knew they had to act quickly to channel it into something concrete. Tina arrived just after noon, her laptop under one arm and an energy drink in hand. She didn't bother with small talk, jumping straight into action. "I've been talking to a couple of chefs," she said, setting up at the dining room table. "They're in. And not just for the food, they want to help with everything. Promotions, decorations, the whole 9 yards. Snoop leaned back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. "That's what I'm talking about. This ain't just about food. It's about showing the world what we can do when we come together." They spent the next few hours brainstorming. Tina had connections with musicians who could perform, while Snoop had relationships with artists and creatives across the city. The vision began to take shape. A night that would celebrate not just black culture, but the diversity of Los Angeles itself. By mid-afternoon, Jason arrived, his energy as infectious as ever. "All right, y'all," he said, clapping his hands together. "I've been working the phones. We've got some big names interested. A couple of venues downtown are open to hosting, but we'll need to move fast. This thing is blowing up." Snoop raised an eyebrow. "Big names? Like who?" Jason grinned. "You'll see. Let's just say they'll get people talking." The three of them worked late into the evening, hammering out details. They decided to host the event in a converted warehouse downtown, a raw, industrial space that could be transformed into something magical. It was the perfect blank slate, a place that could reflect the creativity and resilience of the community. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Snoop leaned back in his chair, exhausted but energized. "This ain't just a dinner," he said, his voice thoughtful. "It's a statement. We're showing them that we don't need their approval. We're building something better." Tina nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "And we're doing it our way." By the time Jason left, the plan was well underway. They had a venue, a growing list of chefs and performers, and a clear vision. All they needed now was to make it happen. The following days were a whirlwind. Tina and Jason worked tirelessly to finalize the logistics while Snoop used his platform to promote the event. He posted videos on social media talking about the importance of community and inclusion. Each post was met with an outpouring of support, as well as stories from people who had faced similar discrimination. One story in particular stuck with him. A young woman named Annika shared how she and her family had been turned away from a different restaurant the year before, despite having a reservation. She described the humiliation of standing there, with everyone staring, and the quiet resignation of walking away, knowing there was nothing they could do. Snoop read her words aloud to Tina and Jason during one of their late-night planning sessions. "This is why we're doing this," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "It ain't just about what happened to us. It's about all of them." The night before the event, the warehouse was a hive of activity. Chefs unpacked their supplies, setting up makeshift kitchens along one wall. Tables were arranged in long rows, covered in crisp white linens and adorned with simple floral arrangements. String lights hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the space. Musicians rehearsed on the small stage at the far end of the room, their melodies filling the air. Snoop stood in the center of it all, taking it in. This was what he had envisioned. A space that felt both elegant and welcoming, where people could come together and feel at home. Jason joined him, his hands on his hips as he surveyed the scene. "Man, this is something else," he said. "You think they're ready for this?" Snoop smiled, his gaze steady. "They ain't ready, but they're about to be." Tina appeared moments later, clipboard in hand. "Everything's on track," she reported. "The chefs are good, the performers are set, and we've got people lined up to document the whole thing." "Good," Snoop said. "This ain't just about tonight. We need to show the world what we're about." As the final touches were added, Snoop took a moment to himself. He stepped outside, the cool night air a welcome relief after the bustling activity inside. He thought about all the people who had supported him, who had shared their stories and poured their hearts out in the comments of his posts. This was for them. It was also for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. For every kid who had been stared at in a store, for every family who had been turned away at a restaurant, for every person who had felt the sting of quiet, insidious racism. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a revolution. Tomorrow they would show the world what a table for all really meant. The evening finally arrived. The once bare industrial warehouse in downtown Los Angeles had been transformed into a luminous haven of culture, art, and celebration. The string lights overhead bathed the room in a golden glow, while long tables covered in white linen stretched across the space. Fresh flowers and candles adorned every table, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and inviting. The air was filled with the tantalizing aromas of diverse cuisines, blending together into a symphony of spices and flavors. Guests began to trickle in, greeted personally by Snoop Dogg and his closest friends. Each person who walked through the doors was met with warmth and gratitude, their presence a testament to the power of community and resilience. Some were well-known figures, artists, activists, chefs, while others were everyday people who had simply been moved by the message. They all shared one thing: the experience of being excluded, overlooked, or diminished in spaces where they should have felt welcome. The energy in the room was electric, a palpable mix of excitement and anticipation. People mingled, laughing and talking as they took in the vibrant art displayed along the walls. Every piece told a story, each one contributed by an artist who wanted to be part of this moment. From bold paintings celebrating Black culture to photographs capturing quiet moments of resilience, the art was as diverse as the crowd it adorned. Snoop stood near the entrance, his sharp suit tailored to perfection, watching as the room filled. Jason joined him, holding a glass of wine. "You see this?" Jason said, gesturing to the buzzing crowd. "This is what it's all about." Snoop nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, man, this is bigger than us. Look at all these people coming together for something real." At the far end of the warehouse, a small stage had been set up for the evening's performances. The lineup included musicians, spoken word artists, and even a comedian who had volunteered to perform. Snoop had insisted that the entertainment reflect the diversity and talent of the community, and the performers had delivered in spades. As the last guests arrived, Tina took the stage to welcome everyone. Her crimson dress flowed as she walked across the platform, her voice commanding yet warm. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her words amplified by the microphone. "Tonight, we come together not just to share a meal, but to make a statement. We're here to celebrate who we are, where we come from, and the beauty of our community. This isn't just a table, it's a movement." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers filling the vast space. Snoop watched from the side, his chest swelling with pride. Tina had a way of capturing the moment, of putting into words what so many were feeling. The dinner began shortly after. Chefs emerged from their stations, bringing out dishes that reflected the rich tapestry of cultures present in the room. Nigerian jollof rice, Jamaican jerk chicken, Southern collard greens, Haitian griot, and other culinary masterpieces were placed on the tables, each dish telling its own story. The guests marveled at the flavors, savoring every bite while exchanging stories and laughter. Snoop moved from table to table, greeting guests and listening to their experiences. At one table, an older man shared how he had been refused service at a diner decades ago. "Tonight," the man said, his voice thick with emotion, "this feels like healing, like we're finally being seen." At another table, a young woman spoke about how she had hesitated to come, unsure if she would feel out of place. "But being here," she said, "it's like I finally belong somewhere." The words resonated with Snoop. This was exactly what he had envisioned. A space where people could come together without fear of judgment, where they could celebrate their heritage and their humanity. As the evening progressed, the performances began. A spoken word artist took the stage, her voice ringing out with raw power as she recited a poem about resilience and defiance in the face of racism. The crowd hung on every word, their applause thunderous by the end. A jazz band followed, their smooth melodies creating a backdrop of soulful joy. Tina joined Snoop at one of the tables, her face glowing with pride. "Can you believe this?" she asked, looking around at the room. "We actually did it." Snoop nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Yeah, we did, and this is just the beginning." Jason approached with a bottle of champagne, grinning from ear to ear. "I say we toast to that, to the beginning of something bigger than any of us." The three clinked their glasses, the sound lost in the sea of laughter and conversation that filled the room. For the first time in what felt like forever, Snoop felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not for his music, not for his fame, but for something that truly mattered. The highlight of the evening came when Snoop himself took the stage. The room fell silent as he stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding yet humble. He paused for a moment, taking in the sight of everyone gathered before him. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady and filled with emotion, "we proved something. We proved that we don't need their approval to know our worth. We don't need their tables to feel like we belong. We built our own table. And let me tell you, this table, it's for everybody." The applause was deafening, the energy in the room reaching a crescendo. People stood, clapping and cheering, their faces alight with hope and pride. Snoop raised a hand to quiet the crowd, his next words carrying even more weight. "This ain't just about one night," he continued. "This is about changing the game, about making sure that no one, no matter where they come from or what they look like, ever feels like they don't belong. We're just getting started." The cheers erupted again, the room electrified by his words. Snoop stepped down from the stage, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and resolve. He knew this night would be the first of many. As the evening wound down, people lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth of the space they had created together. Snoop stood near the exit, shaking hands and hugging guests as they departed. Each thank you and word of encouragement reaffirmed the importance of what they had done. When the last guest had gone, Snoop stood in the now empty warehouse, the echoes of the night still reverberating around him. Tina and Jason joined him, their faces tired but triumphant. "We did it," Tina said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Snoop nodded, his gaze steady. "Yeah. And now we keep going." The morning after the Table for All event, Los Angeles seemed to hum with a different energy. Social media was ablaze with photos, videos, and posts from attendees who couldn't stop talking about the night. Images of vibrant dishes, soulful performances, and candid moments of joy filled every corner of the internet. Hashtags like #TableForAll and #WeBelong trended across platforms, capturing the spirit of what had taken place. But not all the attention was celebratory. Eminence Dining, the upscale restaurant that had refused Snoop Dogg and his friends, found itself at the center of a storm. Negative reviews flooded their pages on Yelp, Google, and other platforms. Customers described being treated poorly, ignored, or outright turned away due to their race or appearance. The backlash was relentless. By midday, the restaurant released another statement, its tone as polished and detached as the chandeliers in its dining room. The message was the same as before. They regretted any misunderstanding and were committed to fostering a welcoming environment for all guests. The response only fanned the flames. Former employees began coming forward anonymously, sharing stories of discrimination they had witnessed or experienced while working at Eminence Dining. Some described being told to prioritize preferred clientele, those who fit the restaurant's desired image, while subtly discouraging others. Others recounted incidents where management dismissed their concerns about racially insensitive policies. By evening, the restaurant's carefully constructed reputation had begun to unravel. Snoop sat in his living room, scrolling through his phone as the news continued to unfold. Tina and Jason had joined him, both equally engrossed in the avalanche of revelations. "Did you see this one?" Tina asked, holding up her phone. A former server said they were told to seat black customers near the kitchen if they couldn't turn them away outright. Jason shook his head, his expression a mix of anger and vindication. Man, they dug their own grave. Years of this nonsense, and now it's all coming out. Snoop leaned back on the couch, his face unreadable. It's wild. We didn't even have to say much. They exposed themselves. Tina glanced at him, her voice softening. Yeah, but you sparked it, Snoop. That video you posted, it gave people the courage to speak up. He nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. This wasn't just about taking down a restaurant. It was about a much larger issue, one that wouldn't be solved with a single scandal. Still, he couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing justice catch up with Eminence Dining. The next day, the backlash reached new heights. News outlets picked up the story, interviewing former employees and customers who shared their accounts of discrimination. The footage from the Table for All event was prominently featured, juxtaposed with Eminence Dining's hollow apologies. The contrast was stark. One side represented hope and inclusion, while the other symbolized exclusion and elitism. In a particularly damning segment, a local news anchor detailed the restaurant's history of catering to a predominantly white clientele, despite being situated in one of the most diverse cities in the world. The report included testimony from a chef who had left the restaurant after being told his dishes were too ethnic to fit the menu. The chef, now working at a community-based eatery, credited Snoop's event for giving him the courage to share his story. Snoop watched the coverage with a mixture of pride and sadness. He had wanted to create something positive, to show the world what inclusion looked like. But the fallout for Eminence Dining was a stark reminder of how deeply entrenched these issues were. That afternoon, the restaurant's owner held a press conference outside the now infamous establishment. The man, a middle-aged figure with an expensive suit and carefully crafted demeanor, stood before a crowd of reporters. His voice was measured, but his words betrayed his desperation. "We deeply regret the events that have taken place over the past week," he began. "Eminence Dining has always strived to provide a welcoming environment for all our guests. We acknowledge that there have been instances where we fell short of this goal, and for that, we sincerely apologize." The reporters didn't hold back. Questions about the employee testimonies, the discriminatory seating policies, and the viral backlash came fast and hard. The owner stumbled over his responses, repeatedly emphasizing that changes would be made and promising diversity training for all staff. The press conference did little to stem the tide. If anything, it fueled further scrutiny. Social media lit up with posts mocking the restaurant's attempts at damage control, with many pointing out the lack of genuine accountability in their statements. Jason burst into Snoop's house later that evening, waving his phone triumphantly. "They're done, man. Reservations are getting canceled left and right. People don't even want to be seen there anymore." Snoop smirked, shaking his head. They thought they could throw some buzzwords at it and make it go away. People are smarter than that. Tina joined them, scrolling through her phone. "There's more," she said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "A few big-name celebrities have called them out directly. It's over for them." As the week went on, Eminence Dining's downfall accelerated. Photos of empty tables circulated online, a stark contrast to the packed dining rooms the restaurant once boasted. News broke that several high-profile investors had pulled out, citing the scandal as irreparable damage to the brand. Within days, rumors of a potential closure began to swirl. Snoop watched it all unfold with a sense of inevitability. He hadn't set out to destroy Eminence Dining, but their actions had consequences. And now, the weight of those consequences was crashing down on them. One evening, Tina showed Snoop a message from a local activist group. They wanted to thank him for shining a light on an issue that extended far beyond a single restaurant. The message ended with a simple but powerful sentiment. "You gave us a voice." Snoop leaned back, letting the words sink in. This wasn't just about Eminence Dining anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to stand up and demand better. When the official announcement came that Eminence Dining would be closing its doors permanently, it barely made headlines. By then, the public had moved on, their attention captured by the growing movement that Snoop and his team had started. That night, Snoop drove past the darkened restaurant. The lights were off, the windows bare. He pulled over, stepping out of his car to take it all in. Jason joined him a few moments later, his expression thoughtful. "It's kind of poetic, isn't it?" Jason said quietly. "They tried to keep us out, and now there's nothing left to keep anyone out of." Snoop nodded, his gaze fixed on the empty building. "Yeah, but this ain't about them. It's about what we do next." As they stood there, the quiet of the night seemed to hold a promise. The fall of Eminence Dining wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The fall of Eminence Dining sent shockwaves far beyond Los Angeles. News of the scandal and the closure of the once prestigious restaurant spread across the country, sparking conversations about racism, exclusion, and accountability. But for Snoop Dogg and his team, the focus was already shifting. The Table for All wasn't just a single event. It had become a movement. In the weeks following the first dinner, the hashtag #HashTableForAll continued to trend. Stories poured in from people across the country who had faced similar discrimination. Activists, artists, and community leaders began reaching out, eager to bring the concept to their own cities. What started as a response to one act of exclusion was evolving into something far greater. A nationwide call to action. Tina was the first to suggest expanding. Sitting in Snoop's living room with her laptop, she scrolled through dozens of emails and messages. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "People in Chicago, Atlanta, New York, they all want to host their own dinners. They're asking for advice on how to organize, how to make it happen." Jason leaned over to look, his excitement palpable. "This is it, man. This is how we take it to the next level." Snoop nodded thoughtfully, leaning back in his chair. "If we're gonna do this, we gotta do it right. We can't just hand them a name and walk away. We gotta help them build something real." And so, the work began. Tina created a detailed guide for organizing a Table for All event, outlining everything from finding a venue to involving local chefs and artists. Jason used his connections to reach out to potential sponsors, securing funds to support events in underserved communities. Snoop lent his voice and platform to amplify the movement, recording videos and appearing on talk shows to spread the message. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, Table for All dinners were being planned in cities across the country. Each event was unique, shaped by the culture and identity of the local community, but they all shared the same core mission: to create a space where everyone was welcome. One evening, as they were finalizing plans for the next dinner in Los Angeles, Tina shared a story that had come in from Atlanta. A young black chef named Malik had struggled for years to break into the high-end dining scene, facing constant rejection and thinly veiled racism. After hearing about the movement, he reached out to host a Table for All dinner, bringing together chefs of color from across the city. "Listen to this," Tina said, reading from Malik's message. For the first time, I feel like I'm not just cooking for survival. I'm cooking for my people. This is bigger than food. It's about belonging. The room fell quiet as the weight of Malik's words sank in. Snoop finally broke the silence. That's what this is about, he said, giving people a chance to be seen, to show what they can do. The first out-of-state dinner was held in Chicago, and it was a resounding success. The city's rich cultural heritage was on full display, with chefs serving everything from deep dish pizza to Nigerian suya. Local artists decorated the venue with murals celebrating black and brown communities, while musicians performed a blend of jazz, blues, and hip-hop. Snoop and Tina flew in for the event, walking into a room filled with laughter, music, and the unmistakable aroma of soul food. Malik was there too, his face alight with pride as he introduced his dishes to the crowd. "This is just the beginning," he told Snoop, shaking his hand. "We're gonna do this every year." Similar events followed in Atlanta, New York, and Houston, each one adding new voices and perspectives to the movement. News outlets began covering the dinners as a cultural phenomenon, highlighting the way they brought people together while addressing deep-seated issues of exclusion and inequality. But the movement wasn't without its challenges. As Table for All gained traction, it also attracted criticism. Conservative commentators accused Snoop and his team of politicizing food and entertainment, claiming the movement was more divisive than inclusive. Some venues faced backlash from patrons who didn't want to be associated with what they saw as a controversial cause. One evening, as they prepared for another dinner in Los Angeles, Jason brought up the criticism. "Man, you seen what they're saying on the news? Talking about how we're making everything about race, how we're just trying to get attention." Snoop shrugged, his expression calm but resolute. "Let 'em talk. They don't get it because they don't live it. This ain't for them. It's for the people who've been through it, who know what it feels like to be told they don't belong." Tina nodded. "And the fact that they're talking means we're doing something right. If they weren't mad, we wouldn't be making an impact." The criticism only strengthened their resolve. Snoop continued to speak out, refusing to let detractors overshadow the positive change the movement was creating. He reminded his team and himself that every step forward came with pushback, but the work was worth it. As the months went on, the movement continued to grow. Each dinner became more than just a meal. It was a celebration of resilience, a reminder that spaces could be reclaimed and redefined. People who had once felt excluded now had a seat at the table, and they were using that seat to lift others up. One night, after a particularly successful event in Houston, Snoop sat with Tina and Jason in the hotel lobby. The three of them were exhausted, but buzzing with energy, the glow of the evening still fresh in their minds. "You think this can last?" Tina asked, her voice quiet but hopeful. Snoop looked at her, his gaze steady. "It ain't about lasting. It's about planting seeds. This thing we're doing, it's bigger than us. Even if it slows down, even if we step back, the people we've touched, they're gonna keep it going." Jason raised his glass in a toast. "To the seeds, then, and to everyone making sure they grow." The three of them clinked glasses, their laughter echoing softly in the empty lobby. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they were building something that mattered. The Table for All was no longer just an idea. It was a movement, and it was unstoppable. A year had passed since the first Table for All dinner. What had started as an impassioned response to exclusion had grown into a powerful nationwide movement. Across the country, communities were hosting their own dinners, each one a celebration of culture, inclusion, and resilience. The movement had become a symbol of unity, a way for people to reclaim spaces where they had once been told they didn't belong. Snoop Dogg stood backstage at the latest Table for All event, held in a sprawling venue in downtown Los Angeles. The warehouse where it had all started now seemed small compared to this expansive space, transformed into a vibrant haven for the evening. Long tables stretched across the room, covered in crisp white linens and adorned with fresh flowers and candles. The air was filled with the aroma of diverse cuisines, blending together in a tantalizing symphony. The energy in the room was electric. Hundreds of guests had already arrived, chatting, laughing, and marveling at the art installations that lined the walls. Each piece told a story of struggle, triumph, and the beauty of community. Musicians rehearsed on a nearby stage, their instruments filling the air with the promise of a night to remember. Tina approached Snoop, clipboard in hand. She looked as polished and determined as ever, her excitement barely contained. "The room's packed," she said, glancing at her phone. "We've got artists, chefs, activists. People flew in from all over the country for this." Snoop nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "They came because they believe in it. This ain't just a dinner anymore. It's a movement." Jason appeared moments later carrying a glass of champagne. "Man, you gotta see the crowd out there. They're hyped. This is bigger than anything we imagined." Snoop glanced toward the stage, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about how big it is. It's about what it means." As the three of them stood together, the lights in the venue dimmed, signaling the start of the evening. Tina took a deep breath. "You ready?" Snoop nodded. "Always." He stepped onto the stage, the applause rising like a wave as the crowd spotted him. The sight was overwhelming. Hundreds of faces, each one reflecting hope, pride, and a shared sense of purpose. He took a moment to let it sink in before leaning into the microphone. "Good evening, y'all," he began, his voice steady and warm. "A year ago, we were told we didn't belong. But instead of accepting that, we built something of our own. We created a table where everybody's welcome." The crowd erupted into cheers, their enthusiasm filling the space. Snoop raised a hand to quiet them, his expression turning serious. "This ain't just about tonight. It's about every night someone felt like they weren't good enough. Every time someone was told they didn't belong. This table, it's for all of us. And it's proof that we ain't gotta wait for permission to take up space." The applause was deafening, the energy in the room electric. Snoop stepped back, letting the moment breathe before continuing. "Tonight, we celebrate who we are. Our culture, our stories, our strength. So let's eat, let's laugh, let's connect, and let's keep building because this is just the beginning." As he stepped off the stage, the crowd's cheers followed him. Tina and Jason were waiting nearby, their faces glowing with pride. "That was perfect," Tina said, squeezing his shoulder. "You set the tone for the whole night." The evening unfolded in a whirlwind of food, music, and connection. Chefs brought out dishes that celebrated the diversity of Los Angeles. Spicy West African suya, rich Creole gumbo, fragrant biryani, and savory tamales. Guests savored each bite, sharing stories and laughter as they connected over the meal. On stage, performers kept the energy high. A spoken word artist delivered a powerful poem about resilience and belonging, her words drawing nods and applause from the crowd. A jazz band followed, their melodies weaving through the conversations like a warm embrace. The night felt alive, every moment a celebration of the community that had come together. Snoop moved through the crowd, stopping to talk with guests at each table. At one, a young man shared how he had been inspired by the movement to start his own restaurant, one that prioritized inclusivity and diversity. At another, a mother told him how the dinners had given her teenage daughter a sense of pride in her heritage. "It's not just a meal," the mother said, her eyes brimming with emotion. "It's a reminder that we matter." Snoop nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. This was why they did it, for the people who had been made to feel small, for the moments that reminded them of their worth. As the evening wound down, Snoop found himself back on stage. The room quieted as he looked out over the crowd, his heart full. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Thank you for showing up, for believing in this, and for being part of something bigger than all of us. This table we've built, it's going to keep growing, and as long as we keep building, there'll always be a place for everyone." The applause was thunderous, the room filled with hope and determination. As the guests began to leave, Snoop stood by the door, thanking each one personally. Their smiles, their gratitude, their stories, all of it reaffirmed the importance of what they had created. When the last guest had gone, Snoop stood in the now empty venue with Tina and Jason. The tables were covered in the remnants of a meal well enjoyed, the air still buzzing with the energy of the night. "We did it," Tina said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Again." Snoop nodded, a small smile on his lips. "And we'll keep doing it." Jason raised his glass, his grin wide. "To the next one." The three of them clinked glasses, their laughter echoing through the quiet space. They knew the work wasn't done, that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges. But they also knew they were building something that mattered, something that would outlast them. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Snoop looked up at the stars. The table for all was more than just a dinner, more than just a movement. It was a promise to keep fighting, to keep building, and to make sure that everyone, everywhere, had a seat at the table. And that, he knew, was only the beginning. Thank you for watching this incredible story to the end. Snoop Dogg and his friends turned a moment of humiliation into a powerful movement, proving that unity and action can break down any barriers. If this inspired you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Share this video with your friends. It might make a difference in their lives too. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from in the comments. See you in the next story.